I ask people when I do workshops, oh, so is starting a new community like getting married, starting a business, or going on a long, complex overseas trip with lots of itinerary and baggage? And the answer is all three. You know, the things you can learn living in a community are remarkable. What you mostly learn about is yourself. You come face to face with yourself like nothing else. My favorite quote about community is, the longest, most expensive personal growth workshop you will ever take.
This is Peak Moment. We are living at a peak of human innovation, information, wealth, and health. But we're also at a peak of population and consumption, with rising temperatures and declining resources fueled by cheap oil and gas. Peak Moment Television, bringing you examples of positive responses to energy decline and climate change through local community action.
Hi, welcome to Peak Moment. I'm Janaea Donaldson. Communities. People everywhere are talking about how do we build community, and I'm with a person that has been looking at that for quite a while. My guest today is Diana Leafe Christian. Thank you for joining me.
You're welcome.
You are the editor of Communities magazine and an author, and you need to give the whole title of your book.
Okay.
I want you to do that.
Oh, sure. The book I wrote, which is right there, is Creating a Life Together, Practical Tools to Grow Eco-Villages and Intentional Communities. It's an attempt on my part to find out when communities are successful, what did they do that made them successful? And for those 90% that fail, it's kind of a high percentage.
That is a huge percentage.
What did they do and not do that they might have done if they'd known better?
Now, I realize we could talk about that for 3 hours, but give us some of what did you learn? What works to help a community, or what doesn't work?
Well, the first thing I learned was that in researching this book, which was easy for me to do because I was the editor of Communities magazine for 10 years prior to writing this book. And what I found is that the people who started successful communities didn't do certain things and did do certain things. And the ones who started communities that failed did the opposite things. Meaning, you know, that there were certain things that if you do them, it tends to increase your chances for success. So, in a nutshell, it's have a common vision and purpose, and you all know that you have it.
So you really pounded that out,
yes.
What your vision and your purpose are.
Absolutely. We all know our mission and purpose. We know what it is, and we're all going there.
Okay.
Secondly, a fair participatory decision-making method. And if it's consensus decision-making, to get good training in it.
I would expect that, because for the little bit I lived in community, I realized, and there was only 3 and 4 people, so it's not like 10 or 20 or whatever. How did we make decisions, and what do you do with those who are unsure, and you know, all of that was a really critical part of that.
Yeah, people who try to do consensus and don't really know how can make themselves crazy and make themselves run screaming from the room and say, I'll never do this again. And all it is that they don't have basic knowledge.
And my hunch is that in the last, 15, 20 years, that the art of working with consensus has gotten more evolved or more refined, or else more people know about it or are communicating about it?
I'd say there's more people teaching how to do it well.
Okay.
And more people teaching what the requirements for it are, which is that you have a common vision and purpose. You all have equal access to power. One person's not the employee and the rest employees.
So it's
equal
right.
playing field. And that you have training in it. Okay, so more about what I learned about what tends to work is that you have clear agreements in writing.
Whoa.
Written
A lot
down.
of groups. Written down.
Written down. And they're clear, and you know what your agreements are, and you can always go look them up.
So that you've got agreements here about whatever, your decision making or money or about ownership, about
rights and responsibilities of the members of the community. What are our communication agreements? How do we agree to communicate with each other? How do we agree to treat each other? How do we agree to handle conflict when it arises? What are our methods for staying feeling connected with one another, even though we might disagree and have a charge on the disagreement about some item of policy or strategy?
Right.
How do we own this property together if we do? What are our financial obligations? What are our labor obligations? What are our agreements if some of us don't do what we say we'll do or don't honor our agreements? What then?
What do we do? Yes.
Yeah.
That was a big one we spent a while with. It's like, what do you
Yes.
do when you agreed, it doesn't happen, now what?
Yeah, now what?
And
a lot of new communities don't think that they have to think about that. Because they think, well, if we're going to live in community, everything will be better and different.
Well, it's much like the illusion around a marriage. You're in the honeymoon phase, right? And everything's wonderful and everything's aglow. And then when you get down to the practical time, working together, it's like, you need those same kind of agreements.
Right. It's exactly the same. I ask people when I do workshops, oh, so how is starting a new community? Is starting a new community like getting married, starting a business, or going on a long, complex overseas trip with lots of itinerary and baggage? And the answer is all three. You know? So yeah. So other things that help new communities be successful are to know what you need to know the right brain things, clear, honest communication, good process skills, how to vision together, how to be willing to be vulnerable and clear and honest in interpersonal communications. And the left brain stuff, budgets, strategic plans, how to buy real estate, how to get a loan, how to have clear agreements and contracts and agreements, how to do bookkeeping. A lot of people have stars in their eyes and a vision in their hearts, and they don't know they need those kinds of skills.
And you realize that's the starting the business side of this, because it is a corporate entity of sorts.
If you're going to all own property together, be it urban, suburban, semi-rural, or rural, you need to have a business-like way of handling things. Do you know what I saw when I looked at this? The 10% that are successful, God bless them, they are. The 90% that fail, many of them fail in lawsuits. They started out with ideals of cooperation and shared resources.
And they end up in lawsuits.
In a court of law, duking it out with their hired gladiator lawyers. So I wanted to know how not to have it be like that. That's why I wrote this book, really. So other things I found were they need a method to help each other stay accountable to their agreements. They need to have good communication and process skills, be really important right from the beginning. And also, they need to select other people to join them as co-founders or as new members based on certain criteria. The criteria of, do you understand and support our common vision and purpose? Do you have a history of getting along well with other people?
Oh, wow. So you do some screening here, obviously.
I suggest this
you want to
very
be good
strongly.
Partners.
There are people who are new to community or somewhat visionary and idealistic who haven't had much experience in community, and they will say, absolutely not. Anyone who wants to join can join. To do otherwise would not be community, and they're quite serious about this. However, the longer any group is having a community experience, the more they soon learn, oh my gosh, we have to have a gate with an opening to it that we allow people to pass through with criteria and a membership process. We need to screen people, and we need to have an orientation. And we need to have long engagements. Why is joining a community like getting married? Well, it is to many people. And we need a long engagement.
So that you'd have enough time to really seek out not just people in their best behavior,
exactly,
or to just mouth the words, even if they believe it in their heart, that yes, I follow this vision. I'm sure when the rubber meets the road, you've got to find out, is this person going to pull their share, or are they going to block things? Are they going to, what kind of dynamics are they going to bring to this?
Exactly. And so I would say engagement as in an exploring member period or a provisional member period, so that the person is not actually a full member with full decision-making rights yet, but is finding out what it's like so that that person can see, is this a good fit for me?
And the community can do likewise.
Can do likewise,
Are they a good fit for us?
Yeah. So that's the nutshell of what I've written in this book.
What I really hear is that's really strongly about communications, all of that, about agreements, about a vision, about, certainly behavior, of course, fits into that.
Yeah.
The interpersonal dynamics, maybe in the broadest sense of that, is really a lot of this.
Yeah, and also, why is the group together? What is it they hope to do? If the word vision means how we see the world as we are wanting it to be a better place and a different place than it is now, I think a mission and purpose is, so what are we going to do? What is our group going to do to bring about that vision of a better world? So different communities have different missions and purposes.
Yes, and be more specific to their place and the people involved in it and so on.
Sure. For example, a co-housing community has as its mission and purpose to be a great place to live with friends and neighbors. It's a wholesome place, a safe place for children, a lovely place to grow older in the good company of friends and neighbors, a place to learn all about sharing resources and cooperative decision-making, our own neighborhood that we manage ourselves, where we have dinner with our neighbors. It's optional, but very desirable, 2 or 3 or 4 nights a week. And so that's one kind of community. An eco-village, a whole different kind of community. It's generally about how can we live as sustainably, ecologically sustainably as we can in such a way that we're not using up the air and the water and the soil and the resources for future generations.
Right.
We're always looking at all of our actions in our daily life as, are we borrowing from future generations, or is this truly sustainable? Now, eco-villages are also looking at social sustainability. Are we getting along well? Are we having a good time? Are we passing on a culture to our children and our children's children that will be pleasurable for them? I mean, do they like what we're creating here? And there are urban eco-villages and rural ones.
Which are going to have very different flavors, I would imagine.
That's right.
Because they're dealing with very different forces.
That's right.
Social and environmental and so on.
Right. That's right.
I hadn't thought about that the structures of different, when we were, the communities movement was, what, in the 70s, 80s?
Well, in North America, it's been here all along, but there was a sudden wave of grassroots interest, perhaps in the late 60s and early 70s and early 80s. And that was maybe the old hippie commune style, which there are a few of those communities left, but not very many. And then in the early 90s and throughout the middle 90s and the late 90s until now, there was a huge new wave of interest, even larger, I would say. But it has another turn on the spiral, if you will. Instead of, oh, let's all go out to Uncle Joe's farm and lay around in hammocks and not have any agreements and just have it be a commune, which is a term that means income sharing, where we put all of our money in the same pot, and any salaries or jobs we have, it all goes into the same pot, and we all get a little stipend, and we just live here forever in this happy
commune model. Okay.
Commune model.
Okay.
Anymore, there are communes still, income sharing communes, but only about 10% of the communities that exist. Anymore, people want to have business-like organizations. They want to put in equity. They want to be able to get their equity out again should they leave. They want to have clear agreements so that the kind of horrible civil war-like conflict that has and can occur in communities doesn't happen because they thought about it in advance. It's sort of like, sometimes it's even the same people only decades later, you know, wanting to have a more well-managed, clearly delineated, more carefully thought-out version of the same kind of live lightly on the land and be a good neighbor and have good connections with friends and neighbors.
What I hear in that is there's a kind of maturing. We've done, maybe culturally, some maturing to know we need those communication skills and those clear agreements and so on. You know, so it can be the same people. I can imagine have done some growing up and hard knocks and some learning to be able to now bring that, bring those skills to the. So there are people that are now talking about, you know, are very concerned about peak oil, certainly climate change, but peak oil is one that's going to wake up a lot of folks. You just did an issue on Communities Magazine about peak oil. What prompted that, and where did you go with that? You've got it here.
It's right there, yes.
Peak oil and sustainability and food security and survival during energy
This
decline.
is Communities Magazine, which I have edited for the last 12 years. It's a publication of the nonprofit Fellowship for Intentional Community, which does a number of beneficial actions for anyone interested in joining communities, being in communities, starting communities. So Communities Magazine is a quarterly magazine that our nonprofit publishes. And so we do a different theme each time. And here in the spring 2006 issue, the name of the issue is Peak Oil and Sustainability. So some of the authors who contributed articles said, oh, good, I'm going to join a community because there will be plenty of food and shelter and safety there. And other authors said, don't count on it, sweetheart, because a community is only just a little bit more sustainable than any suburban neighborhood or any city place, so you might be better off for a very short while, and then you won't be. So what are your relations like with your neighbors in your community? Are you in excellent terms with them? Do they highly value you? Do you have something so valuable to them that they feel a sense of concern about your safety and well-being? The lead article, which I co-wrote with Jan Steinman, said, okay, here's what peak oil is. Here are the likely consequences of it. What are the reasons someone living in a community might have false hope or some ideas that are probably not too sound? So then we take these ideas like, oh, well, we're off the grid. And we just debunk that. Oh, yeah, what about when your batteries need replacing? What about when your inverter breaks?
Right.
What about when your DC disconnect no longer disconnects?
Yes. Yeah.
And so on and so on. Oh, well, we have plenty of wood. We can heat ourselves with wood. Oh, really? How long have you got wood for? Do you have so much forest that even just dead wood is going to get everybody through a winter?
And everybody around you, your neighbors, because there's the poachers.
Exactly.
Who will come get it for the same purpose.
Yeah, and there really can't be a society with haves and have-nots in a time when people are increasingly feeling the press of ever-escalating food prices and ever-escalating fuel prices
Right.
and ever-escalating prices of utilities and ever-escalating prices of everything from medicines to glasses to false teeth to insulin to medical care
Yes.
to
Yes.
everything that people need. So if oil is the underlying basis economically and physically of everything from soil amendments to plastic to transportation
Everything.
to the energy that creates manufacturing from power plants that use barrels of oil for that.
Right.
So what is that going to do as it becomes increasingly scarce to our economy and to our physical needs? So when people say, oh, the answer is eco-villages, I think maybe, maybe not. We have to be intelligent about this.
I think there's a kind of utopian view that says, oh, we can just, as if we are not interdependent on all kinds of things around ourselves, just as you mentioned.
Yes, absolutely.
What I hear in that also is that desire to come together. People talk about, not going it alone, and it's a kind of a, I see as we approach peak oil, people talk more about building their neighborhoods and their communities and getting to know each other and bonding. So this automobile and this oil that has managed to separate us out and isolate us out into our little metal boxes on wheels,
Yeah.
the loss of that may indeed be what starts to get people talking. And I would imagine the skills that you're talking about in an intentional community, we need that in our neighborhoods.
Do we ever?
All over the place.
There are a lot of skills, which you might call products, that intentional communities can export
Aha.
to the wider world.
Okay.
Consensus decision-making, shared power, cooperative decision-making, good communication and process skills for keeping up a sense of connection, maintaining a sense of being connected and in a good relationship with others while even disagreeing on
Yes.
matters of policy or strategy. And buying in volume, bulk buying,
Yes.
bulk sharing goods, sharing resources.
Right. Right.
There have been intentional communities who slowly but surely begin to influence their neighbors, local regulatory agencies, the building inspectors. Various communities have had an effect on the wider community around them.
That's heartening. Actually, I live in Nevada City, and so we have a very large intentional community just beyond in the Ananda Village. And I've watched how they pioneered some things, for example, building new kinds of electronic gear for off-grid, because they were all off-grid, that have come back into the wider community and helped all of us. That's just one little teeny example.
Yes.
But it's encouraging to think about what they've learned, particularly in the communication decision-making, to bring it back to our social structures.
You know, it occurs to me that we should probably define intentional communities and eco-villages, because we haven't.
That's true.
Shall
That's
we?
true. Now, you discussed about eco-villages a little bit.
Yes.
Tell me Tell me about
Okay,
these.
well,
define them.
Intentional communities is kind of an umbrella term for eco-villages, co-housing communities, urban communities, rural communities, housing co-ops, homesteading communities, rural back to the land homesteading communities, conference and retreat centers, sometimes ashrams and meditation retreat centers, which are residential. Intentional community is the umbrella term.
That's the big
Yeah,
one.
the big one. And so my favorite definition comes from the Fellowship for Intentional Community, who publishes
right.
the magazine I edit. And it's when a group of people live with each other or next to each other, or at least close enough to carry out the common purpose together.
To carry out a common purpose together.
Yes, and the common purpose can vary widely. So, for example, in co-housing communities, it's to have a great neighborhood. In eco-villages, it's to have an ecologically sustainable lifestyle. And I'll say more about eco-villages in a minute. An urban group household, it's basically to share expenses, have fun, have shared meals, buy in volume, have shared resources, and it's fun.
I was going to say companionship here. I mean,
Yeah,
you got
it's fun to live with other people.
Yeah.
And especially in cities, because it just makes living more pleasant than
for
the
sure.
kind of isolation one can feel in living in a city. And yoga ashrams, Zen meditation centers, That's a kind of common purpose.
Yep.
A conference and retreat center, like our eco-village where we're filming this, is a place where people can come and learn and do educational programs.
Right.
And that's a very big component of the community's movement. So let me tell you about eco-villages specifically.
Okay.
My favorite definition comes from Robert and Diane Gilman's 1991 book called Eco-Villages and Sustainable Communities.
Okay.
And so what they say is, an eco-village is a human-scale, full-featured settlement where human activities are harmlessly integrated into the natural world in a way that supports healthy human development with multiple centers of initiative and which can be successfully continued into the indefinite future. So I can
Woo!
explain all of that
Woo!
if you'd like
All
me to.
right, let's do it.
Okay.
Let's go. That's a powerful. We have about 6 minutes left, just to
Okay.
give you a clue.
Human scale means we all know each other, we recognize each other by sight and by name, and when we make decisions together, we feel that we can influence the outcome of the decision.
Okay.
Full-featured settlement means we live here, we work here, our social life is here, our spiritual life is here, we grow much of our own food here, and we don't have to leave that much to get those necessary aspects of life. Full-featured settlement.
Full featured. Wow. That's
Now, not very many
I was going to say,
eco-villages are attaining that now.
Right.
What they are is aspiring eco-villages. That is to say, this is more like a series of goals than a series of we're like this now.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they're working towards it. Human activities harmlessly integrated into the natural world is pretty obvious. We're not harming the air and the soil and the microorganisms and the water and the creatures we share this land with.
which is a big job. I mean, we're not doing toxicity. We're not doing, road building, or very little, or so.
Or
on,
we
all kinds of
are,
things.
and we're aware of the damage that we're doing, and we're finding
mitigate
ways
it.
to mitigate against it for future projects, because there needs to be some kind of transitional strategy to get from where we are to where we're going.
Because at the very least, we're all going in these these gasoline-fueled vehicles.
Right.
Most of us.
Right.
Not always.
So we build houses, and what do houses have? Well, they sometimes have cement and rebar and sheetrock. Well,
Yeah.
we can build with natural building materials. However, we also can build sustainably with more conventional materials, but just build more sustainably. So it's a choice point for many eco-villages.
Yes.
Supports healthy human development means that we're not burnt out and exhausted and having an awful time trying to meet all these needs.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
in fact managing to enjoy one another's company and live a relatively decent, happy life. Multiple centers of initiative means various individuals or groups of individuals or families or households or co-ops of people within the eco-village might decide to create a school or a sauna or overnight lodging or a business or a nonprofit. The community doesn't decide to do it, manage it, and fund it. The individuals within it do
That's
it.
nice.
But the whole community gets the benefit.
Yes.
So you mentioned Ananda Village near Nevada City. There are many businesses and nonprofit organizations started by members, which the whole community gets the benefit of.
Right.
And somebody's good idea, they took the initiative, and hence they benefit, the community benefits.
Both the community and the broader community, I will point out. Not only just the Ananda Village, but the
Sure.
broader community is benefiting.
That's right. And lastly, successfully continued into the indefinite future is a little bit like the Six Nations Iroquois saying, we want any decision we make to be beneficial for 7 generations into the future. What decision are we making now that will benefit us? Sure. But will it benefit the people in the future, or are we borrowing against their heritage of the earth, the water, the soil?
Which we are doing hugely on the planet in our industrial lifestyle here that's built on infinite growth and using up all the resources
Right.
hugely.
So I live at Earth Haven Eco Village in the Blue Ridge Mountains of western North Carolina, not far from Asheville. And we're 60 people on 320 acres, 13 neighborhoods. We're all entirely off the grid. We're starting to grow much of our own food. And we're aspiring to be an eco village. So that's where I live.
How long has that been there? How long have you been there?
I've been there 5 years. It's been there 12 years.
And so what do you think the growing edges are? And then I'll ask you in our last 3 minutes here, what advice you have for people who think they want to start an intentional community? What are the pitfalls? What are the... I know, there's a lot
I don't know
there.
that I could do all this in 3 minutes. So the 6 things that I mentioned at the beginning, 7 things, are probably the best advice I could give anyone about starting a community. About finding one, I'd suggest they read my new book, which is out in spring of 2007, which is called Finding Community: How to Join an Eco-Village or Intentional Community. It's good advice about how to find them, how to research them, how to visit them and be a good and welcomed guest, how to evaluate one's visit, how to choose from among one's candidates of communities, and how to enter gracefully in a way that's pleasant for the person joining the community and for the community as well.
Sounds like the next perfect step after your, how do you start one? Well,
I got to thinking that maybe there needed to be some advice for folks who were saying, okay, where are they?
yeah.
What do I need to know? How can I do this in a way that doesn't make me crazy or is hard? So I wanted to make it easier.
That's a good gift.
Yeah.
It's a good gift to us.
Yeah.
So what have you learned in your time living in your intentional community?
Oh, I've learned how to tie rebar and pour cement, how to water batteries and read the trimetric meter, how to get along well with people better than I used to know how to facilitate a meeting, how to cook for lots of people, how to do dishes for lots of people, how to be on committees, how to take minutes. I've learned some of my worst faults and some of my best attributes.
Sounds like real world with the volume turned up in a
Yes,
sense.
that's exactly what it is.
You just intensified it.
It's like Life 101, but cubed.
Because it's there in your face. You can't run from it.
That's right.
See, in our mainstream culture, you can run from another relationship. You can move. You can escape. If you've decided to be in community, in some level, you're choosing to stay in there and hang in there, and maybe some commitment to each other's growth and learning here.
I've also learned sheet mulching and all kinds of principles of permaculture design because I live with lots of permaculture teachers. The things you can learn living in a community are remarkable. What you mostly learn about is yourself. You come face to face with yourself like nothing else. My favorite quote about community is, the longest, most expensive personal growth workshop you will ever take.
That's fabulous. Diane, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Wonderful. You're watching Peak Moment, Community Responses for a Changing Energy Future. I'm Janaea Donaldson. Join us next time.